Let's start the practical part of our seminar, and now we have presentation of Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement and WTO Agreement on Government Procurements. Francois, you're welcome. Welcome to Ukraine.
All right. Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting us today. It's very much appreciated. Thank you also to the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade for taking an active role also in this workshop today. So, as you mentioned, my name is François Routier. I work at the Department of Global Affairs, Canada. So we're basically the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development for Canada. And I work in the government procurement team in the Trade Policy and Negotiations branch. So I will just do a brief presentation today to quickly go over Canada's approach to government procurement in free trade agreements, and then talk a bit about the structure of these agreements and of the GPA, the Agreement on Government Procurement at the WTO. And then I'll focus on Canada's commitments, so you have a better understanding of what we committed to towards Ukraine and Ukrainian businesses. And I'll have a quick word too on the supplier complaint mechanism. All right, so Canada's government procurement regime is generally open to potential suppliers from all around the world. The key objectives of our procurement regime include best value for money, competition, impartiality, and transparency. Our approach to GP, or government procurement, in trade policy aims basically at securing new market access for our businesses and granting reciprocal access, obviously, to the businesses from the other party. For the time being, the only agreement where Canada and Ukraine have reciprocal commitments in terms of government procurement is the GPA, the WTO Agreement on Government Procurement. So you alluded to the GPA earlier in your introduction. So Ukraine acceded in May 2016 to that agreement, and that's, oh, I see the screen is changing. All right. All right, and so this is through the GPA that we have reciprocal access to our government procurement markets. The Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, or CUFTA, also includes a chapter on government procurement. And as you may know, that agreement was signed last summer, and both Canada and Ukraine are working hard right now to ensure it can enter into force shortly. So in terms of Canada's market access commitments, oh, hold on, I'm going too fast here. So basically, in addition to the procedural rules that we agreed to in the chapter of a free trade agreement, we also undertake market access commitments. All right, excuse me. Okay. So the market access commitments that are undertaken both by Canada and by Ukraine, they're laid out in a series of annexes. So the first set of annexes lists all the government entities, you know, the department, the agencies, the state-owned enterprises that are covered by the agreement, and also the values above which the obligations apply. So basically monetary thresholds above which the government procurement obligations kick in. The second set of annexes lists the goods, the services, and the construction services that are subject to the agreement. And the last annex lists a short series of exceptions of a general nature that apply to each party's commitments.
Sorry, any problem?
Yes, just looking for the right slide here. Sorry. Okay, so I'm turning to Canada's commitments on government procurement in the CUTIS. I think I'll... all right, sorry, that's working with the Ukrainian version.
I think this is the right slide.
Okay, thank you very much. So Canada covers the procurement activities of most federal government departments in the CUTIS, departments and agencies, and then also 10 crown corporations. That's the name we use in Canada for state-owned enterprises. For the federal departments and agencies, the thresholds I was alluding to earlier are around 220,000 Canadian dollars for goods and services, and $8.5 million for construction services.
Just a second, please.
Yes.
This is the key. Technical support. So can we go on?
Yes.
Go on.
Yes, I can go on. I'll just, okay, let me just check. All right, so, okay, we should be good here.
These are Canada's commitments with regard to state procurement. Because
okay. Yes, that's good. Thank you. So I mentioned the thresholds for federal departments and agencies. That's the lowest thresholds that applied. And if you look at state-owned enterprises, or what we call crown corporations in Canada, these thresholds are the same for construction services, but then they're higher for the procurement of goods and services. So basically, the commitments on government procurement in the CUTIS, as they apply to these 10 crown corporations, they start at $600,000 and a bit and above. So there are a few exceptions, but generally speaking, all goods are subject to the CUTIS government procurement chapter. There is one key exception, which is defense and security related goods, which are basically never covered in trade agreements for as regards government procurement. However, for services, not all services are covered. The services Canada covers in the CUTIS, they're listed in Annex 10.4 of the agreement. And in terms of construction services, they're all covered, with the exception of dredging services and also construction services procured by the Department of Transport or on its behalf. So I mentioned earlier that the last annex lists exceptions of a general nature. For Canada, these include, for example, shipbuilding and repair, urban rail and urban transportation equipment, as well as procurement conducted in support of agricultural and human feeding programs. So if you want to see the full list, I would invite you to take a look at Annex 10.6 of the CUTIS. So I will now turn to the WTO GPA. The key difference between the GPA and the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement in terms of access to procurement in Canada is the inclusion of provinces and territories in the GPA. So the procurement activities of most provincial and territorial government departments and agencies are covered in the GPA. The thresholds that apply there are the same as the ones I highlighted earlier for crown corporations. That is a little over $600,000 for goods and services, and then $8.5 million for construction services. So apart from that very important difference, the other elements of Canada's market access commitments in the GPA are almost identical to those in the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. But I would just like to highlight the importance of this addition, because in Canada, through just the constitutional makeup of and the attribution of powers between the federal government on the one hand and the provincial and territorial governments on the other hand, a majority of the procurement is carried at the provincial level. So that's an important addition. So one of the key elements of the rules in the chapter on government procurement in CUFTA or in the GPA is accountability. And one of the things accountability mean in these agreements is that companies that think their rights were violated have recourse to a supplier complaint mechanism. So what this means in short is that if a Ukrainian supplier or company believes that a Canadian procuring entity has not fully respected its commitments as part of the CUFTA or the GPA, then it can present a complaint. And here in Canada, at the federal level, that complaint would go to the Canadian International Trade Tribunal. So this is a small judicial body that is looking at some trade-related issues, and they're also the body looking at these complaints from suppliers relating to government procurement opportunities at the federal level. So basically, the CITT is responsible for hearing the complaint from the supplier, be it a Canadian or a foreign supplier, and deciding whether the procuring entity respected its obligations under the agreement. And if it did not, then the CITT can provide for compensation to the supplier, which could eventually include lost profit. Provinces and territories are responsible for their own supplier complaint mechanism for procurement that they undertake. For the time being, most of them use their regular court system, but I believe that most provinces are now looking at establishing a body similar to the Canadian International Trade Tribunal that would basically specialize in hearing government procurement complaints. So just looking ahead a little bit, you may be aware that Canada and the European Union signed what we call a Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement in October of last year. And people are working real hard right now across Ottawa to make sure that this agreement is provisionally applied in the coming weeks. So government procurement was one of the key elements in that agreement, and a very significant commitment Canada undertook in this agreement was to set up an online single point of access for all covered procurement, which would be akin to what you have in Ukraine, and I believe is called Prozorro. So it may sound like something innocuous, but right now the way things work in Canada, we have a single point of access for federal procurement, and then each province and territory is responsible for advertising its own procurement. Now, through this commitment we undertook with the European Union, all the notices of intended procurement for procurement covered under CETA, which is more than what we've committed to in the GPA, for example, this will all be posted on one single website. So this will make businesses' life much easier identifying government procurement opportunities that may be of interest to them. Another development happening right now in Canada is the finalization of what we call the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, which is also known right now as the Agreement on Internal Trade. So that agreement was recently renegotiated, and the whole idea behind it is to reduce internal trade barriers between provinces and territories. And government procurement also features prominently in this agreement, and we do expect procurement by provinces and territories to be more aligned in the future as a result of the commitments they've undertaken in that agreement. So that was in a nutshell Canada's international commitments on government procurement and what commitments we undertook towards Ukraine and Ukrainian suppliers. I didn't go into too much details because I think you want to hear more from Manny about how to actually do business with the federal government. All right, sorry, somebody was sending in a question. So I will leave it there, but I'm very happy to take questions. This could be right now or at the end of this seminar, or also later on via email. You have my email address here, my phone number, so you're very welcome to ask questions regarding government procurement in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francois. We have 5 minutes for questions, and during your speech I have tracked your questions. You answered a few of them already, in particular about Prozora comparison of your system and Prozora. Thank you about update claims and complaints as an instrument for access, and also about division between provincial and federal levels. Also, our respondents asked you to provide sources of information on procurement tender about the procedure. As far as I understand, you have certain links which can be used by our businessmen. So if you have interesting questions from those who joined us online, please answer those questions. 1 or 2, we have 5 minutes yet, and maybe 1 or 2 questions from the floor. Якщо у нас є питання, ви приготуйте, будь ласка, і один-два питання зможемо. Do you have questions you would like to answer now from the online participants?
So I see you raised it and somebody mentioned where if I can provide some links where details about this topic can be shared. I think this is definitely something we can do afterwards. I believe Manny will also show us around some web resources, but we can definitely follow up and share links after this presentation for sure.
Thank you so much. Okay, чи є питання? Do you have questions now? Just questions. Є питання? Так.
А чи можна запитати, там були деякі обмеження щодо оборони і безпеки, але є такий код 3581 CPV.
3581.
Чи по ньому є якісь обмеження?
You said about certain limitations within the CUTIS, and in particular regarding to the production for defense. And we have a question. There is a code, HS code, or which CPTV?
Я вважаю, що треба уточнення, бо мова йде про легку промисловість, так? Спецодяг то військовий одяг.
It's about military production, in particular clothing, and code 3581. Can you say about something about this, or we can delay and answer later?
Sure. Well, I can quickly say something. I don't know how detailed it will be, but okay, let me check. So basically, if you look at the text of the chapter on government procurement in CUFTA, it clearly says that parties can derogate from their obligations as regards procurement of arms, ammunition, or war materials or procurement indispensable for national security or indispensable for national defense purposes. So I'm not sure about the exact HS code that was referred to here, but generally speaking, military hardware is not covered under the government procurement provisions of free trade agreements. Now, this doesn't mean that it's impossible to sell government hardware to the government of Canada. The government of Canada does procure quite a bit of these things from foreign suppliers. It just means that we have no obligation to not discriminate against suppliers from other countries for military goods.
Thank you so much indeed. It's time for the next presentation. Please, I do hope that you will give us more details, more practical information of regard to government procurement, because you're a professional in this field, this particular field.
Okay. Well, I think Costa, can I get the control for the meeting, or am I on now? Okay, thank you. Are you seeing the deck?
Okay, now we have your presentation. That's great. Not yet, just a second, please.
Sure.
Yeah. That's all.
Okay. I can begin?
Yes, sure. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your group today, and I want to thank everyone who worked hard to put this event on, including our colleagues at Global Affairs. My name is Menelaus, Manny for short, Argyropoulos, and I am the Chief of SME Stakeholder Engagement with the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises as part of the Public Services and Procurement Canada Department. Now, Francois has given us some very valuable information and set the context as to how things work with the GPA. From our end, the expectations for today, I'm going to do a kind of walkthrough and paint a picture for you of what it will take a business, any business, not necessarily just Ukrainian business, to do business with the Government of Canada. It is a process, something that all businesses need to adhere to, regardless of where they're from. There's rules, laws, and regulations that apply to how to do procurement, and we're going to go over some of those for you. I'm going to provide you some linkages and some real live examples of what steps your businesses need to do to get started to do business with the Government of Canada, and we're going to walk through some examples. So I'm going to be referring to my English notes here, so I'm going to be looking down at times, so don't mind me. But we're going to be flipping back and forth from the deck as well as the web site examples that I'm going to be giving. So as I introduce myself, I do work for the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises, a fairly new office that was created in 2006. I'm just going to go over what our role is in the next slide. I'm going to highlight for you opportunities that exist for small and medium enterprises in particular, because that's our focus, but we don't discriminate against anyone. We do help any business that's interested in learning how to do business with the Government of Canada. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about and follow up on some of the things that Francois had mentioned in regards to purchasing thresholds. They play a pivotal part in how we do procurement and where and when we do procurement. And then I'm just going to describe the general procurement approaches that are used by the Government of Canada, kind of highlighting who the key players are for businesses to understand and how the procurement process would work if you are actually looking to do business with us. So the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises here in Canada was recently created out of a need to make the federal procurement process here in Canada more open, fair, and transparent to all businesses, including small and medium enterprises. And by definition, our interpretation of small and medium enterprises uses the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development definition, which is employee size. So if you're a sole proprietor or one-person consulting firm or have employees up to 99, you are considered to be small. If you are 100 employees to 499, you are considered to be a medium-sized enterprise or business, and 500 and above are considered to be large businesses. The office was created with a twofold mandate, and our main thrust is to reach out and engage businesses all across Canada and in other jurisdictions, be it here in North America or internationally, to inform them of how to do business with the government. As it is a process, it's something that a lot of businesses have indicated is too cumbersome, too complex, and too expensive to do for most businesses. So if you are new to the game, it can become very complex. The other thing that we do is, well, we do this in a variety of different ways, obviously. We do outreach in the sense that we go around in this particular region. I'm located here in Toronto, Canada, and our jurisdiction is the entire province of Ontario, outside of the National Capital Region, which is in the Ottawa area. So we go out and we engage and collaborate with a variety of different jurisdictions, as well as associations and what we call stakeholder organizations, to inform them and their members of how to do business with the Government of Canada. And this is an outreach event that we are doing today for the Ukrainian businesses through Global Affairs and our groups there in the Ukraine. Our second mandate is to represent the views of businesses within the federal procurement process, so that if there's a barrier or if there's an issue or someone is struggling with some component of our system, to us, we seem to think that it's working fine if no one comes to us and tells us there's anything wrong, and that's just common sense. But if there are issues, just like businesses here in Toronto or maybe somewhere across Canada or even in North America and even in Europe, if we're not aware of what those issues are, we're going to continue to think our processes are working fine. This office was created to help assist businesses and to bring those issues to us so that we can work with our people in Ottawa to effectively shape procurement more efficiently, to make it more efficient, more open, more fair, and transparent for all. So essentially, the office has been in existence here in this region for a little bit more than 10 years. We have engaged well over 200,000 suppliers or businesses in that time frame, and informed them of how to do business with us here in Canada. I'll quickly just proceed into the next slide, which is our coverage area for the various regions. As you can see, starting from Western, which is British Columbia and the Yukon, we have a Pacific office in Vancouver. Our Western provinces and the middle part of Canada is managed by our office in Edmonton. We are located in Toronto here in Ontario region, and that's our region of coverage. And then the province of Quebec is located in Montreal, and our Atlantic Canada office is in Halifax, with our lead national headquarters in Ottawa, and our national capital region that looks after the Ottawa area and the Iqaluit, the Northern Territory, or Nunavut. Now, I've been doing this for about 10 years myself, and I get asked a lot, are there any opportunities really for small businesses to do business with the Government of Canada? And yes, there are. There are a lot of opportunities that a lot of small businesses don't even know exist, because they're not even aware of the fact they can do business with Canada. Canada does business in the neighborhood of about $15 billion to $20 billion Canadian on an annual basis on a variety of different things, essentially more than 15,000 different types of commodities, goods, services, and construction that we procure in order to keep our operations working and government working. So there has to be a need or a requirement by Canada in order to do purchasing. Small and medium enterprises, as you can see in the point at the bottom, represent a very big portion of the contracts that we award through Public Service and Procurement Canada. Now, I'm going to be naming some different departments, and it's important for businesses in Ukraine to understand that there is a main procurement arm of the federal government here in Canada that does all of the major procurements over certain dollar value amounts, and then all other federal government departments that fall under the Federal Procurement Act and function in our procurement system can procure goods, services, and construction on their own up to certain dollar value amounts, and we're going to go over that very shortly. Now, of the Public Service Procurement Canada contracts, and we issue about 18,000 contracts on an annual basis, mostly majority size contracts in the hundreds and millions of dollars, but the bulk of those are also small, low dollar contracts, less than $80,000. And of those 18,000, 14,000 of those are actually less than 80,000, and the majority of them are issued to small and medium enterprises. So small and medium enterprises is a pivotal part of our economy here in Canada, and pretty well sure in many other jurisdictions around the world. They're the engine that drives the economy in the country, and they play a very pivotal part in our procurements. Contracting. So as I noted, Public Service and Procurement Canada is the main procurement arm, and it is important to understand that we conduct activities in regards to federal procurement following all the rules, laws, and regulations that apply to doing business with the Government of Canada. It's not like a private sector enterprise. A lot of businesses that we deal with find it very cumbersome. Most seem to think I could just come to you and you should be able to buy my products and services, and why can't you do that? Well, essentially, as I said, there's rules and laws that apply. We just cannot do business just with one entity, even as much as we want to. We have to give equal and fair opportunity for businesses to bid on these contracts, and that's why we do a competitive process in most instances for our contract awards. As mentioned, we follow the federal laws as well as Treasury Board Canada guidelines to doing procurement. Going back to thresholds again, it's very important for businesses anywhere to understand that there are low dollar thresholds that govern how procurement is done by departments. For goods less than $25,000, an individual department, be it Health Canada, Environment Canada, National Defense Canada, any one of those departments or agencies that are capable of procuring goods and services can do so on their own, as well as contracts up to $2 million for services, and what's not noted here on this slide is up to $400,000 for construction. Each individual department can purchase on their own. They do not have to come to Public Service and Procurement Canada to do that work. Sometimes, if it's highly complex, they may use Government of Public Service Procurement Canada officials to do that work. I've been asked to slow down a little bit. I apologize if it's not coming through too well. It's hard to monitor the chat function and do the presentation at the same time. So I will slow down.
Do you mean Canadian dollars or American dollars? Because Canadian.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, there's a misconception. We only deal in the Canadian dollars, obviously here in Canada. We are not tied in any way to the United States when we do our procurements. So these thresholds are important to understand because individual departments have their own capacity to purchase up to these dollar value amounts. And what that means is individual businesses can approach these government departments and market to them, or take a look and see if they have any registration lists which they can apply to in order to be represented for these types of procurement. For less than $25,000, and I'm going to talk and show you how we handle things with Public Service Procurement Canada, most of this procurement comes from competitive contracting, where we source out 3 suppliers and request them to price us for that work. In the example of the up to $2 million for services, those contracts are usually competed for through the government online tendering portal, which I'm going to talk to you about very shortly. My purpose here is to just indicate that not just Public Service and Procurement Canada can do procurement, but all other 100 or 110 or so federal government departments and agencies can also do procurement on their own. As Francois alluded to, and others in the opening remarks, the World Trade Organization, GAP, is what essentially governs how international businesses can apply to and compete for contracts that Canada issues. You can see here some examples in this particular diagram of how important trade agreements are to the government of Canada, and how they in fact affect our procurements. You've seen the Agreement on Internal Trade, or the Canada Free Trade Agreement now that is being worked out, which is the agreement between provinces to do procurement. There's also the North American Free Trade Agreement in its current state, and the various thresholds that apply for those. The focus here today is on the WTO, whereby you can see for goods in excess of 221,400 Canadian dollars, businesses abroad, and if that WTO stamp is on our procurement contract that we post, is open to businesses abroad to compete for. Likewise, it's the same for services and for construction projects in excess of $8,500,000. These are the procurements that would apply for businesses in the Ukraine. You'll note at the bottom there's a comment regarding notice of proposed procurement. This is a term that is a new term used by the Government of Canada. In essence, it symbolizes a posting for contracts in excess of these amounts will likely be done through Public Works or Public Services and Procurement Canada, and it would be recognized as a notice of proposed procurement, a term synonymous with procurement through Public Service Procurement Canada. Whereas if you see a request for proposal, which is a commonly used term in procurement, this is something that would be posted by individual departments. This slide I will quickly go through. The focus of this indicates that regardless of the amount, even for low dollar goods purchases below the $25,000 mark for threshold for goods, we still strive to reach access, fairness, and competition in those procurements. We would use, obviously, a method of supply by sourcing out suppliers that we may have on our registration database, which I'm going to explain to you shortly, and invite them or ask them or request them for a quotation, which basically means that the lowest price for that particular requirement would be awarded a contract. Now, there's a general misconception with businesses here in Canada and pretty much elsewhere as well, that all government procurement is done based on lowest price prevails. That is not true. And you're going to hear me talk very shortly about best value to the Crown, best value to Canada. In the competitive side of things, we strive to achieve a combination of both of technical merit, quality, and then if you qualify, your financial pricing to determine best value for the Crown to award a contract. And these are done mostly for the larger contracts in excess of these amounts. The focus today was to give you some insight into painting a picture for your businesses of what steps they would need to take and how the process actually works in order for them to get involved. All businesses have to go through this. The main source for access to federal Canadian contracts and procurement is our main website called buyandsell.gc.ca. It's our main web portal. I'm going to break away now and go into it and show you online how it actually looks. It's something developed out of a need by our business community to have an open source type of a website. It was created in 2010 with the intention of making it more simple and more accessible for businesses to gain information into how federal procurement works, and then what are the tools and steps that they need to take in order to engage the Government of Canada in doing business and making better and more sound business decisions for themselves. The site, as I said, is an open source web platform, very intuitive, very user-friendly. It's in fact guided by hits to our site of important areas of interest, and they're ranked top to bottom here. You can see that finding opportunities within buy and sell is key. If you scroll further down, policy and guideline information that is used to establish terms and conditions in procurement is also accessible to all businesses to reference when they're looking through tenders. Finding about goods and services and what they represent, and then details about public works contracts. Very key is the identification and understanding of what standing offers and supply arrangements mean, because it's imperative for businesses abroad to conceptualize that when the Government of Canada requires commonly bought goods and or services in large quantities, or often they establish these known methods of supply known as standing offers and supply arrangements. And these are the areas of interest for Ukrainian companies to source out, to potentially qualify in, to be considered for potential award down the line. And this is very common for large items, things such as food, professional services, and a variety of other commodities that we have. I'll show you in the next couple of slides on the deck some of the main key standing offers that are available. What I wanted to show you is very user-friendly, and it's also as well, it's packed with information and details for not only businesses, but also for government officials. Under the for business category section, there's a variety of different links that users or suppliers can go and access to gain access to our process. The very first one that I'm going to walk you through is the registration to become a supplier with Public Services and Procurement Canada. We'll go over that in a few minutes, but there's also varying other sections such as finding opportunities, initiatives and programs that the Government of Canada through Public Service and Procurement Canada are working on, and other departments. Procurement-related data such as goods and services, and we're going to talk about those because it's important to understand that each procurement that the Government of Canada does has a unique classification coding system that is put upon that good or service, so that when we go out for our procurements, if a business knows what commodity or GSIN code they fall under, it's much more easier for them to focus their attention on that particular type of item or commodity as opposed to others. And they can set up searches to monitor activity within the system to notify them when opportunities come up. But it's also a portal for government and things that we use to access businesses when we need them. Let me just go back to the deck right now and walk you through a couple of other slides before we move on to some actual hands-on examples. The first step that we recommend all businesses do in order to engage Government of Canada and Public Service Procurement Canada. I apologize, the acronym there is Public Works still, but we are now known as Public Services and Procurement Canada. This deck was shared a little while ago, and we recently did that changeover. The key thing to understand is to have your business in Ukraine register in the Supplier Registration Information Database. It's a quick and easy process once you've established a business and have a Canada Revenue Agency business number. I'm going to go back into the website now and walk you through that process. As I click on the Register as a Supplier link, it will take me to another page. And it's very important that users read through the information and instructions that are on these pages. They're intended to provide you details to better offer you information to make a decision on your end whether this is something for you to do or not. The most important thing to understand is that businesses need to attain a Canada Revenue Agency business number. It's a 9-digit number, and that happens for other outside countries to Canada by clicking on the other country link. You can see here right away, non-residents, a GST inquiry line, and then it asks you, where are you from? For the purposes of this example, you will be putting in a Ukraine as the source of where your company is from. Oh, sorry, I just got to move this. There we go. It indicates that you need to be contacting the CRA office in Nova Scotia. So if we go to that, there's some instructional information for you to look through. One of the things to understand, unfortunately, the way that this particular component is set up is that the toll-free number is established as a toll-free number only in North America and accessible by Canadian and United States companies. However, the direct telephone number that's listed on here is accessible. It's the 902 number. We've tested it from our end and it works effectively. It is a long distance call. However, they do collect calls if you're calling from abroad. Essentially, you'll be talking to an agent about acquiring a non-Canadian resident business number from outside Canada, and the agent then will walk you through the procedures of what you need to do. They essentially will direct businesses to the CRA website to download a form which you will need to fill out and fax back to this number located here. Unfortunately, that seems a little dated and archaic in the way this is done. However, there have been some major cyber attacks over the last several years with CRA, and they deem emails not an effective or secure enough method for communicating for this type of endeavor. So faxing for now and contacting by phone number. So that would be step one. Essentially, when you get to registering, how it will look is this. You will start your registration. You will key in your business number. I will put in a dummy number here. And as you can see here, it says 9-digit number, and you'll be asked if you're collecting taxes. And if you do, you'll have an extension called RT0001, and then you start your registration. In here, you will fill out some general information. Okay, your legal name when you registered. You may not have had a name when you registered, so they issue you an automatic name. You might be Ontario Inc. 12345. Put that name in there, your name, your registration telephone number, etc., and pick a username and password, because what will happen is once you receive back your procurement business number after registering, you will then go back into the system, log in to access your account, and you will select the various types of goods, services, and or construction that you can provide the Government of Canada, so that when our buyers are looking for businesses to request quotations from for low dollar contracts, they can source your business name out because you have checked that off. So there's roughly about 80,000 or so, I believe, in this data set. If you register and you are selected, you are likely then down to 1 in 3 businesses that are asked for pricing. So that is step 1. All businesses that are going to be doing work with Public Services and Procurement Canada are mandatorily asked to get a procurement business number, because when you invoice us, if you should ever win a contract, you will need to have that on your invoice in order for Public Service and Procurement Canada to pay you. So I'm going to move on to the presentation. That is step 1. There's a variety of different other things that can happen with the low dollar opportunities, but essentially what we're saying is to register in SRI. If you are looking to engage other government departments in such as the National Defense, Health Canada or Environment Canada, you may want to contact them, because individually they may also have source lists that they use for these low dollar, below $25,000 for contracts. One of the next things that I wanted to outline is the types of documents that are used by the Government of Canada, so that you can have a better understanding of what you need to look out for. The types of documents that exist that we use that are commonly used for public tenders, and this is usually done for procurements above the $25,000 mark, are things such as an invitation to tender. So this is most commonly used for construction type product, contracts, where we invite you to tender and price is the determining factor. Or as I mentioned earlier, we'll invite 3 businesses to tell us what their pricing is and award a contract on lowest price, and that can be known as a request for quotation. The most commonly used terms to access contracts where we don't usually buy a lot of quantity or often enough are known as requests for proposals. Solicitations, where we solicit a proposal or a solution back from business with pricing. And ultimately, the best value to the Crown would be awarded the contract, a combination of their technical scoring as well as pricing to determine an award. This RFP is commonly used by other government departments, while Public Service and Procurement Canada uses the Notice of Proposed Procurement method. So here I'm going to just go back into my website, and I'm going to show you on the buy and sell tender site how to navigate for tenders. The easiest way to do it is to just go into our active tender list. This is currently what is active within the Government of Canada. You can see I went to buyandsell.gc.ca/tenders. That's the Government Electronic Tendering Service web platform that we use now. That's the authoritative source for all our procurement tender documents that we post. So if I go into active, you can see here it's filtered it down, and there's a variety of different category groups that I can further filter it down from. Or I can just simply put in here a search term. It's just like Googling or Yahooing. You know what, I wanted to show you the Notice of Proposed Procurement opportunities that are active currently. I just type in Notice of Proposed Procurement and I hit search. And as you can see here, it's found 68 active Notice of Proposed Procurements. These are procurements issued by Public Services and Procurement Canada. Things such as RF communication test sets, technical qualifications for a standing offer or supply arrangement known as the task-based informatics professional services for a variety of different categories. This particular one is looking for a programmer or software developer, and then additional ones. So just quickly, a quick way of filtering down to the specific element or opportunities that you are interested in. And here you can set up an RSS feed or an Atom feed to produce a syndication for you. It's kind of like bookmarking this. So anytime the bookmark refreshes, it'll give you the latest and greatest in this category. If you wanted to go back and search for opportunities that other federal departments are issuing, you can just search for requests for proposals here. Enter the search parameter, and it notifies me that it's found 119 opportunities for RFPs. So here, for example, a request for proposal is being issued, title insurance provider, and additional here, office ergonomic assessment. So what I wanted to show you is that we have varying terms and documents that we use for purchasing. It all depends on the type of department and the need that we have. And this is one quick way for you to access and find them. I'm just going to go back to the main page here because I will be back to it very shortly to show you other search criteria. So the more commonly used method that the Crown currently uses, as I said, to purchase goods and or services on a regular basis and in quantities is to establish and qualify suppliers, you know, if from Canada or the US or internationally, through what are known as standing offers and supply arrangement mechanisms or methods of supply. And these are introduced more and more now when we're doing a lot of buying in a particular area. All the tender notices go up on buy and sell tenders. So if I wanted to do a search here on active tenders for all the tenders that are accessible through the WTO, so the World Trade Organization. I type in WTO, I click search, and it finds 211 references for WTO. And right off the bat, you can see here, it's solutions-based informatics professional services. This is a standing offer or supply arrangement opportunity for groups to qualify both nationally and internationally. So if I go to this and I show you the actual procurement, you can see here the terms and conditions and the requirements. It indicates some general tender notice information, when it's closing, who it impacts in the region of delivery, as well as who the impacted trade agreements are. You can see here it's subject to the World Trade Organizational AGP. So here you can bid and try to qualify for this. Further down, if you scroll, the requirements are stipulated exactly what businesses should be considering. Refresh notices are indicated here, and here's what we're looking for to qualify businesses in. Some things as business transformation, electronic service delivery, geospatial informatics services, etc., etc. So if you are somehow tied to this type of business, you may want to consider in qualifying for this solutions-based supply arrangement. This is a supply arrangement. So I'm going to go back and just explain a little bit what the standing offers represent and what the supply arrangements represent. First off, as you saw there, I mentioned the invitation to tender. I'm not going to spend any more time on here. Essentially, this indicates that we will invite you to tender, and pricing is the determining factor, as well as the request for proposal or notice of proposed procurement. This is where individual departments or Public Service Procurement Canada go out when they need something that is not on a standing offer or supply arrangement. The supply arrangement, the standing offer opportunity here indicates that you must first look to identify, based on your commodity, if a standing offer exists. Standing offer is determined on a variety of different factors, but essentially it boils down to if we need something often enough, we will then set up this mechanism to qualify suppliers, to have them ready when we need them, to do a call up against the standing offer. And the qualifiers usually qualify based on lowest on their pricing. Fixed price is the determining factor. If you sell a commodity, a widget, a pen, and we buy a lot of pens, my company will look to qualify on here and indicate that I can provide these types of pens for 20 cents, this one for 500 cents, etc., $5, and so forth. So when we come up and we need pens, we may be asking you to fill an order up to $200,000 for pens, and you would be subject to the pricing that you qualified for. 50 cents for this particular pen, I need 5,000 of them. So then we will issue a contract for that. That's the standing offer. On the supply arrangement, supply arrangement is not on here, but the supply arrangement is similar to the standing offer, and where we pre-qualify suppliers, but essentially it represents ceiling rates would apply, where fixed price cannot be determined. And here, if you qualify, we will ask about 10 to 15 of those qualified companies to submit their proposals for consideration, and only those 10 to 15 businesses could apply for that contract. If you are not qualified in that supply arrangement, even though you want to submit a proposal, you wouldn't be able to do so. So there's a variety of different mechanisms, different methods of supply that the Government of Canada uses and accesses in order to fill orders and to do procurements. And in a lot of instances, it would require businesses to qualify to be available for business access. Okay, I'm going to slow down a little bit more again. It's just, this is a very, it's almost a 2-hour seminar usually, and we're doing it in about 1 hour. I appreciate that, and I'll slow down. So okay, my slide deck is off. Let me go back here to the supply arrangement. And the similarities and differences that I wanted to point out to you is that both the standing offer method of supply or the supply arrangement are national and regional, can be national or regional, and they could apply both for goods and services that are purchased regularly. We establish pools of qualified suppliers to have them ready when we need them. Keep a note that this is not a contract award if you qualify. It just means that we qualified you, and you are one of X amount of businesses that are there and accessible by the Government of Canada when we need you. On the side of standing offers, we use what are known as call-ups against the standing offer. So like I gave you the example with the pens, if you are the company that's selected, we will go to you and ask you to fill the order up to 200,000 in this example. And if you could do it, you would say yes, we would issue a contract award, and then you would fulfill the conditions and deliver. If you can't, you could refuse, and we will go to the next company on the list, and then the next company until we find someone that can fill the order. On the supply arrangements, contracts are usually competitive. It is, again, you get on the list. Price is not fixed. If we can't determine that, it would be a supply arrangement. And then specific requirements with scope for the supply arrangement are required. So when we need you, we will ask you to provide us your proposal or solution back with pricing. And then from that, that's where we will award a contract. Okay. I wanted to then just jump back at this point and go back and indicate and show you some examples of procurements that are accessible by Ukrainian companies. As I noted here, I just simply went to buyandSell.gc.ca/tenders. I hit on the active icon on the main page, and then narrowed my focus down to World Trade Organization. That's one way of finding active tenders. We had some questions early on about food. There's some attendees online that indicated they wanted to find out how to approach the Government of Canada in food opportunities. The Government of Canada has a national food and beverage strategy that is in operation and active still, and taking businesses intake so that people can qualify, and is accessible through the WTO in most instances as well. So if I do a search for food, it's found 77 instances of food in the active category area. The very first one, as you can see, is the National Goods and Services Procurement Strategy right off the bat. It's been active for several years now, and it's continuing until the 16th of June, whereby then it would close. At that time, we will have fulfilled our requirements to qualify suppliers suppliers will have had equal opportunity to submit their proposals for qualification in the following areas. You can see here the main categories under the food and beverage strategy are things like meat, poultry, and fish, which is N8905. So remember earlier when I mentioned it's imperative and important for you to find out whether or not you can find your GSIN code, which is your Goods and Services Identification Number. This is the code that I was referring to. So if I'm in this industry and I want to engage the government in opportunities, instead of doing all of that research, all I have to do is just plug in this N8905 code in my search parameters, and I will then focus my attention solely on the interests that I have. Currently active tenders, historical tenders, current suppliers to the Government of Canada, any standing offers that may exist, etc., etc. So if I were to go in here and scroll down, the document itself outlines the exact codes that are posted on the main page. If I was a business in Ukraine and I was looking to qualify for this, I would click just as I did here. I would go down to the bottom of the page where the actual documents are listed for this. You can go through it as well if you were interested here, for example, to find out the meat and poultry category area, the GSIN code. This is a good way of identifying for yourself what's currently happening in this area. Here are related tender notices, so regional, mandatory, or master standing offers for food. Additional ones are listed here. Currently related award notices for this particular commodity group are here. And here it indicates the related standing offers or supply arrangements for this commodity. And you can see here who some of those businesses are that are actually qualified as a supplier right now. And eventually, if a business in the Ukraine wanted to supply these goods or services, they would then look to qualify in the same standing offer or supply arrangement as these companies here. So I just want to quickly go back, since we're running a little low on time, and show you what a document actually looks. So to review this opportunity, you would go to the bottom and look at the attachments and click on the PDF English or French document that you are wanting to review and click on it. Here is just some documentation that indicates what the terms and conditions are for the National Goods and Services Procurement Strategy, and it outlines the purposes of what we're trying to achieve. Now, that's just the strategy. What I'll do is I'll go into another one down here. This one is a tender notice that is looking for food, fresh bread to be purchased. When I look at it, this is active for 1 more year and 4 weeks. If I go to the bottom here, I will access the actual document that I'm going to be using to then look and find how I'm going to be writing a proposal to try and qualify. You can see the common look and feel for Public Service and Procurement Canada tenders, formerly Public Works. It's a common look and feel for all of the tender documents that we have. Important information when it closes, and more importantly, who the department is and who the inquiries or questions for this particular procurement can go to. When a procurement is open and is posted, no business can inquire about that particular procurement with anyone else other than the contract authority on the document, which is Jane Ray, and her telephone number is located here. You would source through this document. It's structured fairly straightforward. There's a general information part, instructions to you, the offerer, different things that you need to consider, how you're going to be evaluated. That's an important one, and assessed, so that you know, as well as any other business that's applying for this, that you're going to be evaluated based on these parameters. Everyone has an equal opportunity to submit and be evaluated the same way. And then it's important to follow up and identify the requirements, which usually are in a variety of different annexes. So that's just one example of how to access a solicitation document and how to continuously monitor and look for the types of commodities that you're looking for. Essentially, the Government of Canada issues a Goods and Services Identification Number, a GSIN code, which, by the way, we are slowly migrating and transforming to the United Nations Standards Products and Services Code that other jurisdictions around the world are using to be consistent. And that process has just begun here within the Government of Canada and will likely be transitioning over this fiscal year. But for the time being, these codes are important for you to identify, because if you can identify that you can find this code, chances are that we are doing business in this area and there's likely a marketplace for you. It's important for businesses to determine if there is a marketplace for them within the Government of Canada. Don't attempt or assume that there is and get frustrated, because if we're not doing business in that area, you will not have any opportunities. I wanted to go back to wrap up. At times, the Government of Canada, depending on the type of contract that is issued and awarded, may require businesses to have security clearances. And security clearances are processed through the Canadian Industrial Securities Directorate, or Contractor Screening Directorate that is known now. You, as a business, will know right away, based on the solicitation document or the tender document that's posted on buy and sell tenders, if there is a security requirement. If there is a security requirement, all businesses must submit their forms to this group in Ottawa to be evaluated and assessed and cleared, to be provided a certificate to get organizational clearance for them to do work for Canada. Essentially, it can take anywhere from 3 to 4 months to get the process done. International businesses, if there's a requirement for secret clearance or regular clearance, it might take a little bit longer, but for secret clearance, it can take well in excess of 1 year or 12 months. So if you're looking to do business with Canada, consider getting security cleared, but it has to be done through a federal procurement opportunity. That's where there's a security requirement list, checklist number that is issued, and only then can you apply to get your security clearances. That's how the process works. But it's not for all procurements. It's essentially for procurements where there's a requirement if you're going to be doing work in our buildings or handling documents by the Government of Canada that requires you to have that clearance. So in summary, I just wanted to paint a picture for businesses on the call here today that there are a lot of opportunities to do business. Now that you're on the WTO, there are a lot of opportunities to look to qualify as suppliers for the Government of Canada through our methods of supply, which are known as standing offers and supply arrangements. If there is a commodity code that you need to monitor, you will do it through buyandsell.gc.ca/tenders. One of the other things that I wanted to show the group is there's also a new website and web location for accessing government information, one-way portal, so to speak, and that is called canada.ca. If you go through canada.ca, it's a one-window opportunity to access all aspects of government, including how to do business with the government. You can see here it's listed by jobs and a variety of different things, immigration, travel, and under the business section, there's a complete section on doing business, starting a business, etc. Our focus is doing business with the government. So if I click on this particular location, you can then have access to you a variety of different procedural steps to follow in learning about doing business with the government. So how to sell, where to find opportunities, different commodity-specific type opportunities, which I mentioned earlier, food, for example, military hardware. The government buys a lot of things for operations. Regular items such as paper clips, toiletries. I use the term planes, trains, automobiles. There's a lot of stuff the government buys. So you can look to find those out. And then a variety of different programs, including then the process of how to sell to us. or other governments. I encourage you to look into that as well. One of the last things I'm going to mention is that there's been a lot of movement recently and collaboration both on the international stage to have our nation be involved in reciprocal trade with other nations. But we're also doing a lot of work, as Francois alluded to earlier, with the federal, provincial, territorial, and now international initiatives. Eventually, what Canada is moving to, and through this office here, we're facilitating discussions and setting up methods of supply and engagement opportunities for businesses to register through one main source and be accessible by multiple levels of government. We've started this here in Canada with our provincial and territorial counterparts and have established agreements for the lower level governments to access Government of Canada standing offers and supply arrangements in specific commodity areas, and it's going to be expanding very shortly. The initiative is being led by our offices in Ottawa through the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises, and it's involving a lot of different groups. So I wanted to mention that so you're aware of it as well. Potentially, you may only need to register in one particular method of supply and be accessible by multiple levels of government. If you need to get further assistance, by all means, give us a call. If it's a procedural type question about registering and accessing the SRI database, our national hotline number, the 1-800 number, I've been told, is accessible internationally. We have received calls from Asia, Australia, and Europe as well. So I'm pretty sure the Ukrainian businesses can access it. Registering and selling to the federal government, we're available by email. I'm not sure if this is on here. These are our regional contact centers across Canada for the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises. If you are out in the Ukraine, our office is available here. The National Capital Region is available, as well as national headquarters through the 1-800-811 number. In Ontario region, you can reach us here through the Aunt Osme internet site, as well as our Aunt Osme mailbox. Questions in writing, we don't have the capacity to translate in Ukrainian. If there's a question, if it could be asked in English, we'll do our due diligence to try and answer it through email. And at this point, I just wanted to thank once again the group for organizing this, CUTIS for facilitating, and our colleagues at Global Affairs for involving us in this opportunity to inform businesses of the opportunities to do business with the Government of Canada.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you from all present here. You have provided very detailed and very comprehensive presentation. And as far as I know, Canada has fantastic online services, but due to certain reasons, not online services work for Ukraine yet. That's why question number one, both online from our audience and of course from our partners, Export Promotion Office, is that how to get PBN number, because many companies try to get this PBN number, and it's unfortunately it doesn't work for non-residents of Canada, and in particular for some reasons it doesn't work for Ukraine yet. So that's why we need your support in this case, and maybe we can take just very particular case, maybe one or two companies which try to get this PBN number and try to follow this procedure step by step together with all our partners from CUTIS project, from CUCC, from of course your agency and Export Promotion Office, and just figure out what problems are, in particular for Ukraine. If possible, can we address these cases to you and try together just afterwards?
Okay. I appreciate the question, and we were aware that there were some difficulties with Ukrainian companies accessing the Canada Revenue Agency contact center. We have contacted them ourselves and had no issues with accessing them. However, that doesn't indicate how it actually functions from abroad. So what I recommend, and I guess what we'll look into from our end, is to see where the snags are, and maybe perhaps have one or two businesses from the Ukraine set up some time to connect with CRA. We have been told that it should be working, but it's to the 902 number, not the 1-800 number. The 1-800 number is only accessible for businesses in US and Canada. But if they call the 902 number, they should be able to access it. Now, I know there are some telephone number buttons that you need to press in order to access certain things, and they are offered in English only. So maybe there's some confusion in getting that done. However, once on, they will be talking to an individual in English who can then point them to what they need to do. Essentially, they will be directed to download the RC1 form, fill it out in its entirety, and then submit it back to the center, in this case, Nova Scotia, via fax. Now, without being outside of Canada and testing it, I can't say where the stumbling block may be, but perhaps what we can do offline is talk to CUTIS, who was having issues, and maybe do a test with them and see whether or not we can get access, and then put together a procedural document for businesses to carry out.
2 guinea pigs in Ukraine and try all the process together.
Yeah, most likely the businesses have to show a little bit of patience. It may mean that they have to leave a message, and then that center will then pick up the messages and return to that individual another message or contact them back. It's sometimes not as direct. We would love to have it more streamlined and more direct, but the situation is that this is what Canada Revenue Agency offers for the time being.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's try this approach. And also, before we start questions from our audience, just also one more question which came from one of our listeners. They requested and have a question. If you have cases with foreign suppliers, maybe you have just some sort of online lesson, or maybe case step by step, or just good example of a foreign supplier. In particular, they asked us about supply of T-shirts and what documents were required, and could T-shirts be sold via GP procedure. So this question is just probably for the case.
Okay, I can answer that. Yes, we are doing business with international businesses, obviously based on the trade agreements. So if you can see my screen right now, I've gone back to buy and sell, and I accessed a contract history search. Okay, so that's under the bottom directory here. This is historical information on all contracts issued through Public Service Procurement Canada over a 5 to 7 year period. And I'm just going to show you, maybe I should learn how to spell Ukraine. I'm just going to put Ukraine. So this is a contract history search for, oh, sorry, yeah. Thank you very much, Costa. If you're seeing it now, I just did a search for Ukrainian companies, for example. It's found only 10 instances of business done through Ukrainian companies, and you can see here that it's Ramada Encore Kiev. It looks like there's been some hospitality that's been purchased, maybe perhaps by Global Affairs, by others that are visiting. And then a couple of other, this contract here back in 2010 for $12,000. So outside of that, you can just go into contract history search and search for another country, England or I don't know, Great Britain, I guess. I'm not sure if that's 3 issued to Great Britain, companies that registered as Great Britain. Royal Pharmaceutical Society was issued a contract back in 2010 for $6,500 through Health Canada. Monoslite, this one was for $60,000. So if you go back into it, you can actually see historically what has transpired, et cetera, et cetera. So this has been a competitive contract to issue work through this British company. So this is how I would ask businesses to go and source out for themselves to see what's out there, but there are instances where we have awarded contracts to international businesses given the circumstances.
Thanks. So now we have a questions and answers session. We have about 20 minutes. So you all are welcome. Будь ласка, у кого є запитання, будь ласка, давайте запитаємо, скористуємося цією можливістю. Будь ласка. You can answer question in English, please. Okay.
Но на ваш вопрос, как он мне и ответил, есть ли инструкции или компании, которые помогают шаг за шагом провести, так сказать, первые тендеры за руку?
Консалтинговые компании в Канаде, наверное.
Okay, questions related to our question number 1. Do you have consultants or maybe service companies which help the foreign companies to participate in tenders? Just at least for the first experiment, could you recommend a consultant or maybe just a company who can help the Ukrainian, for instance, the Ukrainian company to follow all the procedures and participate in the first tender?
Okay, well, I mean, there's a couple of answers to that. So if companies in the Ukraine want to kind of work with businesses here in Canada for opportunities, what we have on our buy and sell page, there's each opportunity and procurement at the top has a listing where they can put their name on to identify to others that they're interested in potential partnership opportunities. If it's from the standpoint of looking to better understand how a Ukrainian business can get involved in federal procurement, I would strongly urge you to contact the Canadian Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce representatives, or maybe they're in the office there, who can align them with Ukrainian companies here in Canada to collaborate or point them in appropriate direction. If that's how I understood the question.
Тобто contact CUTIS and get contacts in Canada. Okay, more questions? Ще питання, будь ласка. У нас є час.
Ще маємо питання, з вашого дозволу.
From the Export Promotion Office.
Так, я буду українською мовою викладати, так? Ну, нас цікавить ще статистика та архів закупівель, ну, на певну кількість років тому, то на 3-5 років, щоб можна було проаналізувати певну галузь економіки для постачальників. І чи наскільки актуальною є та статистична звітність, яка викладається в публічний доступ?
Okay, the Export Promotion Office and in particular GPAinUA project would like to make analysis of statistics and archives of GP within, let's say, скільки років? Within the last 3 or 5 years. Have you got such information for analysis? And just could you say about the accuracy of information provided at the site, just available for the public use?
Francois, are you going to tackle that one?
Well, partly. I mean, in terms of, I'm not sure what exact information you would need for carrying your analysis. I know every year the Treasury Board Secretariat in Canada publishes a comprehensive report. They call it the Purchasing Activity Report. It's available on the Treasury Board's website, and it sums up basically all the procurement that was done by federal government departments and agencies in Canada. And the information there is very reliable. More recently, we've started publishing data on procurement through the Open Canada portal, which is the Government of Canada portal for open data or open government. However, I believe we only started using this medium recently, so I'm not sure you would have the data you need to retrospectively do research for the last 3 or 5 years. Where it gets more complicated is if you want to include provinces and territories, because they have their own powers through our constitution. They are very sovereign in their own procurement, and so you would have to look at each province individually. And I know that some have more easily accessible, extensive information online. Some others not so much. So depending on whether you just want to look at the federal level or both federal and provincial, it may be a little more complicated. I can certainly circulate links afterwards for the purchasing activity reports and open data.
Yeah, and on the side of Public Service and Procurement Canada, this site that I showed you today through Buy and Sell and the contract history search has all contracts awarded through our departments between the last 5 to 7 years. So you can get some thorough results as to where what areas, what commodities Public Service and Procurement Canada has been spending money in over the last 5 to 7 years. So it's pretty accurate, pretty thorough, and contributes to the open data as well.
I have a question received online. The cost of participation in procurement, maybe payments, guarantees, and so on. During your presentation, you haven't stopped on this particular issue, so I would like to answer this question.
Okay. Sure. In terms of cost to do business with the Government of Canada, obviously there's some costs involved from the business side of things, but it doesn't cost any business any money to download, access any of our federal tenders. It's a free site, it's an open tender site, and it's accessible internationally all across the world without charge. In terms of I lost my train of thought, I apologize. There is no cost in that regard to do business with the Government of Canada. There might be costs on the business side if they're looking to prepare proposals or on their end, but there is no actual cost to doing business with the government that way. And then when you win a contract, hopefully you do, the terms and conditions in the document will stipulate the method of payment. Usually what happens is the contractor or the supplier that's awarded the contract that does the work will issue an invoice. Based on their invoice and their PBN number, we will then pay net 30 days, and then you can start charging interest through direct deposit. That's how the Government of Canada issues payment, but essentially it's fairly straightforward. You would have to register to apply to the direct deposit process, but it's net 30 days payment. We're making some inroads into the net 30 days, but for the time being, that's the standard.
Thank you.
I have one more question regarding procuring business number. How long it might take to for consideration and to obtain this number?
Okay, good question. I think they're all kind of tied together, the questions about the PBN. And I just want to establish that to get the PBN from our end is very straightforward and very easy to do after you receive your CRA number. Essentially, it can take minutes, if not the most an hour. The first step is to first get that business number, the CRA business number, established. And I understand that the process seems to be a little bit difficult and there's some hindrance in getting that done. Whether that takes a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to do, that's the first step. But once you receive that Canada Revenue Agency 9-digit number, you can then proceed directly to the SRI to register yourself, and within a matter of minutes, you can receive back that procurement business number. As long as the information you put in there is accurate, it shouldn't take that long.
Thank you. Thank you.
And again, that's only to register for Public Service Procurement Canada's main database for opportunities of less than $25,000 for goods. Businesses also need to consider the additional methods of supply to technically qualify, or to look for these one-off opportunities if they're notice of proposed procurements or request for proposals. And that's how they become active.
Thank you.
I hope that helped.
More questions? No more questions? Okay. I have a question from my list. Does agricultural equipment purchased through public procurement?
I apologize, I didn't hear that. Can you repeat it?
Does agricultural equipment purchased through public procurement?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there was a question that was submitted previously that I saw this at. So if there's a requirement for agricultural equipment by the Government of Canada for whatever purpose, it would be purchased through this process. Now, Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada may have some need of that. There could be some farms that are managed and maintained. That's a possibility. So that equipment, the only way to fully understand how big a marketplace it is, or if we're procuring it, is to go to buyandsell.ca/tenders and do a quick search for agriculture or machinery, agriculture machinery, and see what comes up. Then filter your searches appropriately to determine what's happening.
Okay, more questions from our professionals.
Thank you.
Yes.
If the contracting entity indicate in the solicitation that the tender doesn't cover by GPA and covered, for example, by other international trade agreement, does it imply that Ukrainian companies still can participate in these tenders?
I'm going to give you the procurement answer for that. Essentially, if the WTO is not on the solicitation document, it would not be subject to that trade agreement, then it wouldn't be applicable because of the limitations to the thresholds and the agreements that have been implemented between the countries. If it's open to other jurisdictions, it would be listed on that document. So that's, I think, a focus area for Ukrainian business to look at, is these active tenders, as I did the search, under the WTO flag. Francois, I'm not sure if there's anything else.
No, that's accurate. I suppose the only caveat I would add is that very often, even though there is no need from a free trade agreement perspective to provide non-discriminatory treatment to foreign suppliers, I understand that most of the time our procuring entities do not discriminate, or once they have to open up to one trading partner, well, to just make their life simpler, they open it up to suppliers from all countries. So they don't have to do that. But this is a behavior often adopted by procuring officers who in the end are typically looking for best value for money when they procure.
Thank you.
If you register an SRI, for example, and it's for low dollar opportunities, and you can supply us the items or services, in this case it would be goods, you can be called upon, and then if you are successful, you would need to deliver. So again, keep in mind though, the situation for those low dollar contracts is usually and most often best price. So Ukrainian companies would have to consider, and I had a question asked previously, is what are the implications of a Ukrainian company would win a contract and then have to deliver? Is there issues with the border? Is there issues with any of that? That's all a business aspect that has to be handled by the business on their own. You need to understand the terms and conditions for such things. It wouldn't be part of the procurement process. So you need to take those into account when you're pricing. So for example, if you can deliver pens to Canada for $20,000 and that's what you're pricing, please note that you should take into consideration the duties that would have to come through, any transport costs, etc., to make sure that you have accurate pricing. And that's essentially how we do things. So most often, obviously, for low dollar procurements, the lowest price prevails. It's usually someone that can do it cost effectively and is not too far along or away, but that's not always the case.
So much. Apparently, we have 5 minutes left. If there are no questions, one more question, yes.
Вопрос связан с квалификацией и с критериями отбора.
Qualification?
Да, и критериями отбора.
Question about qualification and criteria for selection.
В Украине, в Канаде действуют различные системы сертификации, лицензирования и технических регламентов. В случае, ну и мы знаем, что имплементация этих документов, этих форм между собой сейчас не принята. В случае участия в тендере украинской компании на предоставление услуг либо работ, каким образом вы будете квалифицировать компанию как могущую выполнить данную работу либо предоставить услугу, если мы будем, украинская компания будет предоставлять собственные лицензии, сертификаты и ссылаться на технический регламент?
Okay, just as you know, presently Canada and Ukraine has different systems of certification, licenses, and technical regulations. And just the implication is not adopted yet. So in case of contracts for services and works, just how will you qualify, admit a company as a qualified for fulfillment of these works of provision of these services if we have such a limitation?
Yeah. So again, the determining factors of what the requirements will be, even for qualification, are going to be stipulated in the solicitation document themselves. And all businesses, whoever they are that are applying, would need to adhere to those, the standards, including if there's a certification that's asked, then that company would need to require that certification. Yes, the standards are different in different jurisdictions, but again, keep in mind, this is a procurement opportunity that the Government of Canada is requiring, and those standards that are inputted into the solicitation would need to be adhered to.
Thank you very much. Apparently time is over, and let me take a minute and sum up results of today's webinar. So we have agreed to take 2 problematic cases with BBM numbers and try to sort them out altogether, if possible. Thank you so much. You will provide for useful links if they are not provided during the presentations, and if they are not in the presentation yet, for just for our colleagues and for our businesses. And let's continue our dialogue. I think that if you have more questions, can we apply to you? Can we address those questions to you after the seminar?
Yeah, they could be sent by email, I suppose, if they have any reference or bearing on the procurement side of things, to our OSME mailbox. I think CUTIS has our email address, and it's on the deck. And I guess if they're related to the GPA or the WTO, I think, Francois, I'll leave it to you.
Yes, no, definitely. You have my contact information in the presentation I gave. It would be a pleasure to answer questions relating to Canada's international commitments on government procurement for sure.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to thank all the businesses here and also people who listen us online and all who send us questions before the seminar and will send us questions after the seminar. Also for fantastic technical support, because technically it's quite complicated, and also for fantastic translation of such complicated and new for us issue. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and have a good day. And I wish all Ukrainians a good evening. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.